Today I'm going to take a bird's eye view of this quarter and look at the possible scenarios it offers for the crypto market. Now, I'm not going to cover the whole market. I'm just going to look at Bitcoin because, after all, Bitcoin is the market leader. On this chart, you can see plotted are the quarterly pivots. I've plotted the pivots of quarter 4, 2021, and the pivots of this quarter. Usually, quarterly pivots are ignored and hardly anyone looks at them, but that is a mistake. It's true that on a bigger picture, they are less effective than weekly, monthly, or yearly pivots, but they still do reflect strong signals and sometimes important levels, like you can clearly see from the chart here. So let's first have a look at the quarterly pivots of quarter 4 of 2021. As you can see, it's very clear that the first candle of last quarter opened in the green above the pivot here, above the quarterly pivot. This moved all the way to test the quarterly R2. Then there was another test of the quarterly R2 which failed, and price went all the way back with a long wick to test once again the quarterly pivot. So you can see that quarterly pivots do play a role, a big role. You can see that these are actually two potential trades for the quarter. The trade up is 56% from the pivot to the R2, and the trade down was another 36%. Okay, so now that I have made my point with last quarter's pivots and how effective they are, let's dive into this quarter's pivots, the first quarter of 2022, and have a look. So here I have plotted on the chart the quarterly pivots. This is the pivot, the first resistance level, second resistance level, first support level, and second support level. As you can see, the quarter opened with price below the quarterly pivot, which was our first signal to develop a bias to the downside. And indeed, price has been playing out to this bias and is currently going down. And to the quarter, our target would be here. This is our first target, the quarterly S1. But let's start plotting on this chart some more levels to have a deeper understandings of the possibilities, the scenarios, and the levels. First, I'm going to start plotting a few other pivots and levels of resistance and support, like the yearly pivot and the monthly pivot. As you can see, once again, the year and the quarter and the month all started with price below all pivots, all three pivots. That's pretty good bias to the downside that we can develop here at the beginning of the month. Let's plot also the yearly R1 and the monthly R1, which are our resistance levels above. And let's plot the support level, the yearly S1 and this month's S1. Now let's plot some zones. This is the first zone between the yearly pivot and the monthly pivot. This would be a first resistance zone in case price decides to bounce here or on the quarterly S1. Now let's plot the resistance high above, a zone between the quarters R1 and the yearly R1. So that's going to be a big resistance zone. It also correlates to the all-time high of Bitcoin. Our third zone would be the support zone below the quarterly S2 and the yearly S1. Both diverge to create what I would consider to be a very strong support zone. So since we started the month, the year and the quarter with a down bias, let's continue to talk about it and explore the correlating scenarios to this down bias. So as you see already, the first target to this down bias from the beginning of the year, the beginning of the month and the beginning of the quarter has been reached, and this target was the monthly S1, the monthly support. Now below it is waiting the quarterly support. So our first high probability move would be this, another move down to the support level of the quarter. We might see here, of course, a bounce back, and I'll soon explore this scenario, but I think it's more likely to see this scenario playing down to the quarterly S1. Of course, since our bias is currently down, we can even see this quarter, this trade, which would bring you 27% from the quarterly S1 and will take price all the way to this zone, which is between the 26 and the 24,600. It's possible. We've seen things like this happen before. That's what the pivots tell us. Don't ignore this. On the other hand, if indeed the monthly S1 holds a support and we do see a bounce, we can see maybe a bounce playing to the upside back to test the yearly pivot, the monthly pivot, and maybe even going up to the quarterly pivot as part of some sort of ranging price, establishing a base. Bitcoin is not sure what to do with itself. Maybe this is also very dependent on other traditional legacy markets. We have to see, but these are the next probability possibilities. As I've said, the first probabilities are to the downside, a continuation, but if indeed there is a bounce here, we can see this bounce going 22% all the way back to this zone between the yearly and the monthly pivot. And if there is continuation to this bounce, also signaling bullishness, then we can see price visiting the quarterly pivot. Now, of course, what seemed to be now a very far-fetched scenario is this bouncing, maybe bouncing here, maybe bouncing on the quarterly S1, and still making it this quarter all the way to the zone where the yearly R1 awaits and the quarterly R1 awaits, a move of another 23%. In my view, highly unlikely, but in crypto, everything is possible. So that's about it from me for today. That's what I've got. Please feel free to subscribe, to like, to comment below. Don't be shy. If you have any question, please write it. I'll try my best to answer it. And if you want to read this analysis, you can also see it on my Medium, the Bitcoin quarterly pivot analysis. Till next time, peace.